When we first looked at the results, we've had to rethink the history of technology completely.
The tragic tales told by shipwrecks are almost as alluring as the promises of long-lost riches and pirate money when it comes to drawing in divers. However, there are instances when shocking discoveries are made within sunken ships. Here are 20 horrific items discovered within shipwrecks for your viewing pleasure. Number 20. The Anticatha Mechanism. Near Anticatha in the Mediterranean Sea in the early half of the 1st century BC, a commercial ship went down. As more and more details about this wreck have been unearthed, it has become clear that it is of great archaeological importance. A shipwreck also has a mechanism similar to the Anticatha. Among these discoveries was a mechanism that casts doubt on our prior assumptions about the level of sophistication of geared mechanisms used at this period. There has been no engineering discoveries involving gears before to the Anticatha device. It wasn't thought to have been used until cathedral clocks were constructed in the Middle Ages, more than 1,000 years after its alleged first usage. The ancient Greeks may have utilized the mechanical gadget to calculate and show data pertaining to astronomical events. This technology was clearly state-of-the-art and surprisingly advanced. The radiography images that came from scanning it reveal that the machine's internal mechanism has 30 gear wheels. This may be puzzling to modern ears, but that's just because historians have only scratched the surface of ancient people's incredibly vast store of information and expertise. Instead than clarifying things, it might make them more cryptic. Number 19. Bua Galley pirate treasure. Built in the 18th century to carry passengers, freight, and most horrifically, slaves in the triangle trade, this ship was completely rigged. Pirate Captain Samuel Bellamy captured the ship during the return leg of her inaugural trip. Through the American colonies, he led the ship in a series of successful captures. The vessel went down in April 1717 while sailing off Cape Cod, Massachusetts, due to a strong storm. 2 men from the crew made it out alive, along with 7 more from a seized sloop. 6 of the survivors were subsequently hanged, 2 were set free, and 1 was sold into slavery. This was done in an unfair manner. Nobody knew what had happened to the shipwreck or the pirate treasures thought to be on board until it was unearthed in 1984, buried under 30 feet of water and 50 feet of sand. Even though the debris field stretched for 4 miles, it wasn't until the bell and brass plate bearing the ship's name were found that the identification of the ship could be determined. Number 18. The USS Lexington. Following that, we have the USS Lexington, another American aircraft carrier from the same WWII era, although this one never made it back from the war. The USS Iwo Jima was among the earliest aircraft carriers ever constructed. About 2 miles below the Coral Sea's surface, in waters approximately 500 miles off the coast of eastern Australia, the crew of the research vessel Pestrel found it. In 1942, it went down at this location, killing 2,116 people on board, along with the 35 planes that were there. Launched in 1925 as an aircraft carrier, the ship was originally commissioned as a combat cruiser. During World War II, it was a part of the historic first carrier-on-carrier engagement, fighting with the USS Yorktown against 3 Japanese carriers. Over the course of the 4 days of combat, the Lexington took heavy damage from a barrage of torpedoes and bombs, and she went down on May 8, 1942. The captain and his dog Wags were among the more than 2,000 crewmen and officers rescued by American ships in the area. Scott, the mascot of the ship, died along with it. Footage shot by the team that located the USS Lexington reveals the ship's massive cannons and blast shields. On the ocean floor, you can find a large number of planes and helicopters. Number 17. A medieval shipwreck. Sunk off the English coast in the 13th century, this shipwreck remained undiscovered until 2019. The ship that went down with so many stone mortar bowls used to grind stone for construction was known as the mortar wreck. The ship's weight was increased by a number of items, including a large quantity of raw marble, Gothic stone gravestones, and massive stone cauldrons. As it went down, a huge sandbank covered it, preserving the shipwreck to an exceptionally high degree. Some even go so far as to say this may be the oldest sunken English ship that has survived to this day. Similar ones exist from earlier periods, such as the Bronze Age, although they are not nearly as well preserved. The problem is that as soon as water contacts a wooden ship that has been kept by sand, it starts to deteriorate. This implies that, despite its discovery, it had to be covered anew with sandbags to save the building from collapsing right away. Number 16. The Spanish Galleon, San Jose. Although treasure hunting is a real profession, the reality is more often than not it's a tedious and disappointing process of retrieval rather than an exciting adventure through underground caves filled with dazzling golden treasures. The possibility of a fortune-changing find glistening on the ocean floor may be what keeps these treasure seekers going. While scuba diving off the coast of Vero Beach, Florida, a group of treasure hunters discovered glistening gold. They had been fortunate with a haul nearby, so they continued their hunt there. However, they were taken aback to discover this shiny hoard of rare coins from the 18th century. Uncomfortably, the discovery of this riches 300 years ago coincided with the destruction of a fleet of ships navigating a dangerous cyclone. Among the coins unearthed in the trove were a handful of the legendary Royal Autos. These were the main reasons why the discovery was so important. The astounding sum of $4.5 million was found in the discovery of 350 coins. Number 15. A cannon from HMS Victory. A large ancient cannon was salvaged from the remains of the HMS Victory. This is exciting stuff. In 1744, over 1,000 sailors perished when the HMS Victory was sunk in the English Channel. After Odyssey Marine Explorations uncovered the warship's remains in 2008, they continued to retrieve artifacts from the debris in 2014. Among them was this massive cannon. Great care was taken to recover and protect the artifacts from more harm caused by the seawater. They are now housed in a museum for posterity. Number 14. A human skeleton on the Antitha shipwreck. The historic trading shipwreck off the island of Anticatha in the 1st century BC is our usual haunt for archaeological exploration. Thanks in part to enormous and awkward piles of gigantic stones, many of the shipwreck's secrets remain hidden below. Despite this, many valuable artifacts have been recovered from the debris. It is quite probable that an earthquake in the 4th century AD deposited these large ancient rocks on top of the site. There were a plethora of exciting things within, as well as one rather eerie skeleton. Even while it serves as a chilling reminder that shipwrecks typically include more than just riches, it makes perfect sense. However, we avoid dwelling on such pessimistic thoughts. What else exactly was on board? A strange antique bronze disc whose origins are unknown, a statue's arm, and the Anticatha Mechanism, our old favorite, were among the artifacts that archaeologists were most thrilled to find among all the old garbage and debris. Now I'm wondering why this bronze disc caused such a stir. The item bore the shape of a circle, was clearly constructed of metal, and bore several perforations along with the likeness of a bull. We have a clue now, don't we? The plot thickens, but not even experts in ancient history can decipher it. You sly old foxes are absolutely right. As soon as something is round and enigmatic, it's got to be extraterrestrials. I dare you to show me that I'm wrong. Number 13. Tiny shoes from the Titanic. The tale of the Titanic's sinking has been told and retold more times than any other maritime tragedy. In the 100 years after it occurred, it continues to captivate writers, filmmakers, and nearly everyone else. On April 15, 1912, the ship sank, and the globe felt the impact. The shockingly senseless death toll of 1,500 people made it the biggest maritime civil disaster in history at the time. As long as there are films and TV series that recount the tragedy and try to uncover the ship's mysteries, the Titanic's story will never really go away. Many died on that sinking ship. Just 300 bodies were ever recovered. Unfortunately, one toddler's identity remained unknown among these. In Halifax's Fairview Lawn Cemetery, He lies interred beneath a headstone reading, "Unknown Child." A sergeant was unable to dispose of a small pair of shoes that had belonged to the little kid, even though the Halifax police were obliged to dispose of all the victims' clothing. Scientists have pieced together the identity of the youngster, who they think to be 13-month-old Ainovami Panula, according to the tiny shoes and the unearthed remains from the burial. Panula died on the Titanic. Number 12. Titanic boots and coat. For whatever reason, many people find it particularly eerie to gaze at photographs of the graves of the over 1,000 victims of the Titanic disaster, and this preoccupation with the macabre extends to all things associated with the ship. So, here are a few more pictures for those monsters. A recent underwater examination of the crash site captured images of these shoes and clothing. The garments were preserved in such a manner that they seemed to reveal the spot where a body landed and the things that person was wearing at the time. It's heartbreaking, yet people can't help but stare at it. On her inaugural trip, the enormous passenger ship Titanic carried 2,223 people. When it came time to make the final judgments, it was decided that the ship didn't need as many lifeboats, even though its initial design called for 64. The owners of the ship were worried that bringing on board all of the lifeboats would make the deck look dreadful for the first-class passengers, but that was obviously not going to happen. After considering the aesthetic impact and practicality of having the right number of lifeboats, they settled on a total of 20 to ensure the safe evacuation of all passengers. It was widely believed that ships at the time would not have enough lifeboats. Because it had always happened in similar situations before, people thought that even a ship in danger of sinking would stay afloat long enough to save its passengers. However, common sense would have prevailed had anyone anticipated the disaster that befell the Titanic. Where do we put those 20 priceless lifeboats now? 4 Engelhart collapsible boats could accommodate 47 people each. 2 emergency cutters could hold 40 people. And there were 14 normal wooden ones that could take 65 people apiece. The tragedy claimed the lives of more than 1,500 people, even though a rough estimate indicates that 1,178 could have been spared. Many people escaped the sinking ship on either the half-full or half-empty lifeboats, which is a relief considering the already limited allotment. Number 11. The SS Thistlegorm. Constructed in 1940 for the British Merchant Navy, the SS Thistlegorm was sunk the following year by German bombers during WWII. The ship sank on October 6, 1941, close to Gas Muhammad in the Red Sea. It was not found for several years until the early 1950s, when renowned French oceanographer and filmmaker Jacques Cousteau uncovered it. The wreck was uncovered by Cousteau after he conducted study in the region and collected data from local fishermen. A motorbike, the ship's bell, and the captain's safe were among the many artifacts retrieved by Cousteau and his crew during their dives to the site. Additionally, they documented the shipwreck's contents with several images that were published in February 1956 by National Geographic magazine. Aside from trucks, armored cars, guns, ammunition, radio gear, and aircraft components, the SS Thistlegorm also carried a cargo of vehicles. The majority of the cargo was its route to assist the Allied forces in Egypt when the ship went down. Number 10. The SS AndreadDor. The SS AndreadDor, a passenger liner, ran into trouble in July 1956 while sailing towards New York City. Starting with a precarious situation, things only appeared to deteriorate until the entire incident culminated in a catastrophic catastrophe, killing 52 people. As she sailed dangerously close to the Massachusetts coast, the ship used radar to help her navigate the dense fog. The ship was dependent on radar equipment for navigation due to the severely low visibility. The problem was that radar could only be useful if read and understood correctly, and that is exactly where things went wrong. A Swedish passenger ship was involved in the collision that occurred in the fog. The first significant maritime collision aided by radar is thought to have occurred during this occurrence. According to the catastrophe investigation, The collision that led to the ship's sinking 11 hours later occurred because the radar was misinterpreted. The ship was hit close below the starboard bridge. Tragically, 52 lives were lost in the incident, while 1,660 others were saved. Number 9. A shipwreck in the Gulf of Mexico. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA team, found a shipwreck from the 19th century in the Gulf of Mexico while testing underwater drone equipment. They explored the wreck and managed to take many pictures of it. They estimated the ship's length to be approximately 124 feet, placing it in the category of schooner or brig. The ship's rigging is practically non-existent, but the hull is mostly undamaged. Nearer examination revealed what seemed to be bent fasteners and burnt wood on several of the beams, according to the experts. They take this as proof positive that the ship might have been in flames when it went down. They further claim this clarifies why there are no artifacts or personal belongings on board. Number 8. 170-year-old beer. A shipwreck that went down off the coast of Finland in 1842 is this. It seems like there was beer on board as well. Some Belgian brewers were so captivated by the beer of the 19th century that they wanted to recreate it, and now you can taste it. The beer itself had remained in pristine condition in the 50-meter depths where the wreck had sunk, thanks to some precisely controlled temperature. The initial yeast and bacteria used to make beer in the 19th century were identified by the brewers' use of all their sophisticated technologies to analyze the microorganisms in the bottles. They could also utilize technology to find out how bitter the beer was, how much alcohol it had, and what color it was. Ultimately, they deduced that the beer's slightly sweet flavor came from the malt's production method and the fact that they had utilized fewer hops than in most conventional beers. Number 7. Sunken World War II aircraft. In 2015, several ocean exploration teams made a discovery in the waters about 30 miles off the coast of San Francisco, California, the United States aircraft carrier Independence. The ship had been hugely important and heavily decorated during the Second World War. She was built in New Jersey in 1942 and joined the fleet in January 1943. She took part in a deadly raid on Marcus Island shortly after, and then participated in attacks on Tarawa, Rabaul, Luzon, and Okinawa in the Pacific. She was then used to transport troops home from the Pacific Front at the end of the war in what was known as Operation Magic Carpet. The ship received 8 battle stars for service during the Second World War, and was then packed off to serve as a target vessel for atomic tests in Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. During these tests, she received heavy damage and was towed back to San Francisco for decontamination. In 1951, she was scuttled off the coast of San Francisco, where she remained intact in her watery grave, untouched until being rediscovered once again in 2015. These images capture the surprisingly intact aircraft carrier resting at the bottom of the ocean. Number 6. Letters from 1941. In the year 2021, a team of historians laboriously assembled a moving puzzle. Iris, a woman from 1941, wrote these parts of a love letter. Approximately 3 miles below the surface on a sunken ship, they were discovered. Someone in the military serving in what is now Pakistan was the intended recipient of the anonymous letter. Along with 717 other letters, this one was never delivered, since a German U-boat sank the cargo ship off the Irish coast in February 1941. Out of 86 crew members, only one managed to survive the sinking. A lot of the stuff on board was retrieved once the disaster was found in 2011. Number 5. Titanic musicians' violins. The fact that the band continued to play music even as the Titanic sank is one of the most well-known facts regarding the tragedy. It is widely believed that the musicians who had set up shop on deck performed music to help passengers remain calm in the face of the disaster. The picture of the band performing while the ship went down has stuck with people ever since. According to popular belief, they performed for over 2 hours in the early hours of April 15, 1912, as people waited in the dark and cold for the lifeboats to arrive. Since they had been entertaining passengers in the ship's first-class lounges up until that point, they started off with lively music like waltzes and ragtime. The incredibly upsetting noises of people screaming and wailing would have been better muted with these songs. Given the profound impact that music can have on one's disposition, it's possible that it helped ease the anxious passengers' nerves. However, when they performed their last song, the atmosphere was everything from upbeat. Rumor has it that the hymn, "Nearer, My God, to Thee," written to bring solace in those last moments, was the last song sung, though there are conflicting accounts. It was a tragic night for the entire band. Number 4. A 1600-year-old shipwreck. This finding in the seas near Caesarea, Israel, revealed the remains of not one but two ships. The maritime archaeology crew that explored the shore discovered extremely ancient shipwrecks that were brimming with relics. It appears that one ship went down around 1,700 years ago, and the other went down around 600 years ago. Tragically, everyone on board perished, as both ships encountered trouble while trying to dock at port. Over the course of hundreds of years, these events unfolded, paving the way for many discoveries. A tiny gold ring was one artifact that piqued the interest of the archaeologists. Among the earliest Christian symbols found, this ring stands out despite its rather insignificant appearance. Encased in a green gemstone, this gold ring bears the image of the Good Shepherd. Believed to have been utilized by Christians in the Roman period prior to the birth of organized Christianity, the motif depicts a young shepherd boy holding a sheep across his shoulders. Common belief is that the ship it was discovered aboard set sail from Italy and eventually sunk to the bottom of the Mediterranean. Number 3. A cursed warship with treasure. This ship was the most formidable opponent for the Swedish fleet in the 1600s. Despite her global renown, it met its demise in 1564 after being entangled in a massive naval engagement and setting fire to itself. Tragically, up to 900 sailors perished in the accident, and an enormous quantity of valuable treasure, including gold and silver, was lost at sea. For nearly 450 years, the disaster lay hidden beneath the ocean's surface. The ship's pristine condition has led experts to speculate that it might be the world's best-preserved example of its type. Because of the scarcity of artifacts from 16th century ships, naval historians have a limited understanding of these vessels. The ship, which is named Mars after the Roman god of war, is in such good shape that scientists do not want to disturb it or alter its environment for fear of damaging it or hastening its decomposition. In order to display the vessel and recreate it through 3D reconstructions, they are using a plethora of fancy and modern technology to take images and scans in 3 dimensions. Additionally, they can piece together the ship's final moments and try to imagine what it was like to be on board. Number 2. The Civil War submarine H.L. Hunley, Confederate States of America. Submarine H.L. Hunley made history during the American Civil War when it was the first of its kind to sink an enemy ship. To end the naval blockade of Confederate ports, the Union built the Hunley. The sub, which had a cylindrical iron hull and was about 40 feet long, was driven forward by a crankshaft that 8 men worked by hand. It was a fairly simple device, but it accomplished its intended purpose to a certain extent. The Union battleship USS Housatonic was blockading the port of Charleston, South Carolina, when it was assaulted and sunk on February 17, 1864. The exact cause of the Housatonic's rapid sinking remains a mystery. However, it appears that the submarine exploded a spar torpedo against the ship. The mission's success, nevertheless, was somewhat fleeting, as one would expect. The submarine vanished without a trace after the attack. The Hunley's remains were not located off the coast of Charleston until 1995. Unsettlingly, the submarine was discovered mostly undamaged, with the remains of its crew still within. This eerily beautiful but ominous artifact of the United States Navy is currently on display in a Charleston laboratory built specifically for its study and preservation. Number 1. A large head. The Anticatha wreck has brought us here again. I can tell you that it's a thrill every minute. At present, we're observing archaeologists as they excavate a huge marble skull from the sunken ship. The Athens National Archaeological Museum in Athens supposedly possessed a statue of Hercules whose head had been missing for years. Thus, the piece had been floating around without it. Once again, divers explored the wreck and discovered what seems to be the massive head of the legendary hero Hercules. They might be reunited at last. From the depths of the world's shipwrecks, that is all for today. Were any of these findings intriguing to you, or did you find the most horrifying one? In the space provided below, please share your opinions with me. Make sure you look at everything else that's showing up on the screen. It's very cool. Until then, see you later.